Good morning and welcome to City Hall. We're going to get started with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Pastor Randy Johns is with Mayfair Church of Christ. He's going to lead us in the invocation. Afterwards, I'll ask Councilman White if he'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everyone please stand?
Let us pray. Our Father in heaven, we acknowledge you as our Creator, confess our dependence upon you. Father, thank you on behalf of all of those who are gathered here this morning for life, for your bountiful, abundant blessings. Thank you for the measure of health we need to fulfill our callings. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. Father, we thank you for the great nation, great state, and great city in which we are blessed to live, and the freedoms that come with that opportunity. Father, your word teaches that as citizens we are to obey the governing authorities, since you have established those authorities to promote peace, lawfulness, order, and justice. Therefore, I pray for our honorable mayor, for our police and fire departments which protect us from harm, for the various levels of city officials, and in particular for this assembled council. I pray this morning on their behalf that through your grace and power, you would grant them wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our culture, that you would grant them a keen sense of the essential needs of our citizens, that you would grant them a deep thirst for justice and truth, that you would grant them an awareness of your presence to guide and direct, that you would grant them a willingness to unselfishly work together in unity, even when there is honest disagreement. And Father, I ask that you would grant them protection for their families, peace in their lives, and true joy in their task. Bless the agenda set before them today. Please give them confidence in what would please you and what would profit those who live and work in and around our beloved community of Oklahoma City. It is in the holy name of Jesus I pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As we call the meeting to order, we're on item 4 of the Journal of Council Proceedings. A is to receive the journal for May 27th and June 3rd, and B is to approve the journal for May 13th and May 20th. Comments or questions on the journal? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 5 is request for uncontested continuances.
Mayor, just a couple of this morning with dilapidated and unsecured, starting on number 8J1. It's page 24, 8J1. Item A, 155, 25 Canyon Road. Asked that that be stricken. The owner has removed. Then moving on to 8K1. Item G, 320 Southwest 13th. We ask that that be stricken. The owner has secured. Item I, 531 Southwest 30th Street. Ask that that be stricken. The owner has secured. Item J, 2324 Northwest 39th Street. We ask that that be stricken. We will rework that as dilapidated. And finally, item K, 2505 Southeast 49th Street. We ask that that be stricken. The owner has secured.
Are there any other requests for uncontested continuances? All right, let's recess the council meeting, convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority. There are 5 items. Comments or questions on the MFA?
Your Honor, I have a question on MFA-A. This is a resolution waiving formal competitive bidding on removing dilapidated structures, demolition services, it says here. I don't understand why we're waiving the competitive bid process.
Let's have Amy Simpson come in and explain that. I actually think that it's a process where we have demolished contractors on standby, then they give us individual quotes on each building. But let's have Amy respond to that.
It doesn't need to be right now. If
Here she is.
Go on.
Good morning. On that particular service, every time council approves the demolition, they actually get quotes from all the qualified vendors. So we're quoting each project versus having a pricing agreement in place to make sure that they're, quoting the right thing and we're getting the best price.
So on each individual project, if I understand correctly, where there's essentially competitive bidding,
I'm sorry.
on each individual project, then there is essentially.
Yes, correct.
All we're waiving is competitive bid on the project.
Right.
All right, ready to vote the MFA? Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCA MFA, convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority, 4 items. Comments or questions on the PPA? All right, cast your votes. It passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCPPA, convene as the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust, 3 items. Comments or questions here? All right, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCEAT, reconvene the council meeting with the consent docket.
Mayor,
All right,
we do
we
have
have
a
a
couple
motion
of
and a second.
we do have a couple of presentations this morning on items A, Z, and BA.
Okay. Let's, you want to take comments from council first
Sure.
on the remainder of the docket? Any comments or questions on the consent docket?
Your Honor, I had some questions on the bidding asphalt versus concrete, and they've been answered. But I think that's a process we ought to continue to look at very carefully. With oil prices going up as rapidly as they seem to be moving, why we need to be cognizant of the fact that concrete may provide a less expensive option with very little difference in life.
Any other comments from council on the consent docket before we hear the presentations? All right, we do have a couple of presentations on MAPS 3 projects. Jim, which one do you want to hear first?
Well, let's go with Alan Brown of FSB to do a presentation on the Fairgrounds Expo Center.
Good morning. Alan
Morning,
Brown, FSB, representing the design team. We're glad to be here today to present the final design for bidding of the Expo building at the State Fairgrounds. I wanted to summarize the project. It's been a while since we've started on this, so this is what what's contained in the final design. The project has a gross building area of 279,000 square feet. The expo hall itself, the main exhibit space, is 201,000 square feet. It has a large kind of pre-function lobby area of 12,000 square feet. It has a full kitchen, 11,000 square feet, restrooms, concessions, service, of course, offices, and storage space. 279,000 square feet. The site is, as you know, is the parts of the site of the current Travel and Transportation Building. You can see the Nork Arena to the west. It kind of sits angled towards towards May Avenue, the new entrance, Gordon Cooper Boulevard entrance, which will be landscaped as part of this project. And to the east, you can see the Phase 1 parking improvements that is under construction. As part of our project, we're also redoing the parking to the southeast of the building, and then of course around the building. And then there is a vendor plaza area for outdoor exhibits that's on the south and wraps around the building as well. This is a bird's eye view from the south, actually sort of the southeast. And I wanted to show you just some typical examples of how the building could be used. This is what we call a typical trade show arrangement of 10 by 10 exhibit booths. And I believe we have over 900 booths shown in this. That's just a typical arrangement. There are a lot of different types of arrangements, just to give you an idea of how large the space is. This is sort of an arrangement you might have for boats or RVs. And there is a large overhead, we call it a hangar door, on the east to be able to move in large equipment into the space, which is 37 feet clear. Auto shows, equipment shows, as I mentioned, large equipment, farm implements can be moved into the building. This is a view from the southeast, the approach, the main entrance. The lobby area I mentioned is on the right, on the left. A drop-off area in the front, and the vendor plaza area you can see wrapping around the front. The main entrance, which faced southeast directly, excuse me, it's primarily glass. The upper portion is a translucent material. It lets light into the lobby space and keeps some of the heat out. The northwest approach entrance faces the arena. There's also a similar entrance on the east for access from the north side of the building. This is the final floor plan. As you can see, the green area is the exhibit hall, 201,000 square feet, which are organized around it on the bottom. On the south is the lobby space. Restrooms kind of flanking it on both sides. Also on the north, in the pink area on the top, is the kitchen area. And there's storage areas and a service quarter across the back.
Alan, how many feet from left to right there and bottom to top?
That is, I've got that written down here, 300 feet by 672 feet for the hall itself.
Okay, so basically 3 football fields from top to bottom, and then
Right.
6 or 7 from left to right.
And it is, as I said, 37 feet clear. The structure is 45 feet, but then we have lighting, that sort of thing, suspended. Excuse me. The kitchen, I want to point out, because I've always been asked about how many people can you put in here. The occupancy of the building is over 14,000 by code, but for a dinner type event or some sort of with food service, the kitchen is capable, according to the vendor, of 4,000 plated dinners at one time. So that's the kind of limit by, just logistics. It's hard to serve more than that, but the kitchen's limited in what the capacity can handle. But that's a big dinner. So the next is sort of some views of the lobby. I mentioned primarily glass with a translucent material above to let more light into the space. It has an exposed structure with a suspended acoustical, we call a cloud, that you can see. And it's that is about 25 feet clear. The materials are polished concrete floor, and then surrounded by, I didn't mention on the exterior, I'll go back real quick. The exterior, the lower portion, is a burnished concrete block in 2 different colors, which I'll show you in a second on the board. Metal panel above. And that material, that burnished block, is taken into the interior, as you can see on the left, the 2 different variegated colors. This is the expo hall itself. As I mentioned, 37 feet clear to the lighting. And you can see an arrangement there. It also has a concrete floor. It has a hardener because of the equipment that goes into this space. And it has the same burnished block around the exterior of the exterior walls. Another view of the interior. This is the finished board, and I'd just like to go over real quick. Probably your monitor may be a better indication, but the upper left shows the 2 colors of burnished block on the exterior, and below those block samples are the 2 colors of metal panel as well. Below that is the translucent panel I mentioned on the lobby space. We also have an alternate over the two entrances on the north using that material. And then below that, the glazing system, the tinted glass, and the framing. And the carpets, the large samples of carpet in the office areas. Below that is solid surface and other materials in the restrooms. On the right, tile samples. And I can see all those. Just typical ceiling samples, and the restrooms are going to be very maintenance-free, but high-quality materials, including stainless steel toilet partitions that are scratch-resistant, and as I mentioned, solid surface tops on the counters, and tile floor throughout. As part of the project, we've got concept that we'll talk about second as far as the budget to be developed for wayfinding and signage, and this shows the concept that will be implemented eventually throughout the fairgrounds. Part of this will be part of our project. So the project budget, our fixed limit, excuse me, our fixed limit as part of maps. Let me find my sheet here. It's $44,399,127, and that includes all construction and the allowances, which we'll talk about in just a second. The final construction bid estimate is $41,173,000 for the base bid. Then we have 5 allowances contained in that. Allowance 1, that'll be bid separately. Allowance 1 is movable fixtures, furniture, and equipment, which will include tables, chairs, that type of thing for the exhibit hall. Allowance 2, Wi-Fi system, devices, and cabling. We have all the structural, the conduit boxes, that sort of thing, built into the base bid. This includes the actual devices and the wires, the cabling. That'll be part of another bid, separate bid. Allowance 3, security system, devices, and cabling, same scenario. All of the structural boxes, conduit are included, and the devices and the cabling will be a separate bid. Allowance 4 is the site finding and digital signage system. Again, this potentially be campus-wide, plus digital display boards throughout the facility. We've also included locations for those in the structural part of the bid. And allowance 5 is the public art component, $469,200, which is 1% of the budget, including the construction contingency. So the final project cost estimate is $43,826,800 compared to the budget on the top. And then we have 4 add alternates, hoping bids go well. Add alternate 1, translucent panels above the north entrances, which I mentioned a second ago. Add alternate 2 is power at the South Plaza area. I mentioned the vendor areas on the south that wrap around. Alternate 3 is partial underground power to get rid of some overhead lines. Not required, but it'd be a nice thing to do. Alternate 4, and concrete paving in lieu of asphalt paving, and that lots of times just depends on the price of oil on the day that bid. So those are that's the budget.
Okay.
Currently.
Questions for Alan? Yeah, Pat, go ahead.
Your Honor, Alan, I've got a question on the
Yeah.
lighting. You're going to have a lot of lighting in this building because it's
Excuse me,
on lighting.
lighting?
And when you put lighting in, did you include LED or energy efficient lighting in there?
That's a good question. I'm glad you asked that. The Expo Hall, throughout, we have LED lighting, which is very energy conserving. It'd be a kind of a unique thing for a facility this large. We also have accent type LED lighting on those translucent panels around the lobby, so they'll be able to glow in different colors and kind of add something a little more interest to the entrance area. Thanks for asking.
We got one more question.
Yep.
On the wayfinding,
Yep.
did I hear you say we're going to put wayfinding signs all over the campus?
I think
out of
that's
this
the
project?
plan. It's not in our budget. Part of it will be part of this project. I think the State Fair would like to have a system that would be extended throughout the campus.
And consistent in design.
Yes,
For it.
right.
But that's going to be paid for out of the State Fair money then?
Well, that's outside my scope. I think that part of it will be part of ours. We have to work out the overall design concept, first, though, and then part of the signage will be part of our project.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Other questions for Alan?
The last slide, Mayor, is the project schedule. And so we're at the, hopefully, council approval today on June 10th. After this, we'll advertise for bids tomorrow, and then our bids will be due on July 10th. Then we'll go through the approval process. The subcommittee and the board will be back for construction contract approval on July 29th, with the contractor notice proceed around August 1st. And then we're anticipating completion, substantial completion around the end of January 2016. Any more
Very
questions?
exciting.
Yeah, that's great. Going to be a great project. So excited to get it moving. Any more questions?
So the notice to proceed, that's going to be, I don't know the dates of the fair, but is that right before the fair starts? And then usually in
Well, the
September?
notice proceed, they'll be able to do some work on the site, and the fair will go ahead this year. They'll have control of the area southeast of the Travel and Transportation Building. They can start site work, foundations, that type of thing. After the fair and some other events are over with, I think around Thanksgiving, they'll be turned over to them completely, and they'll be able to demolish the T&T building. And the fair will lose one next year's fair.
Okay.
Councilman, the plans were to start the day after the fair is completed, but with negotiations with a couple of shows out there, I think they pushed that back actually a little bit beyond that. I think a Fair of the Heart and maybe another one have had some concerns. And so they're working with their rental folks out there to make sure that they can accommodate as many events as possible.
I have a question. It's not for Alan particularly, but this has to do with the revenue associated with this building. I'm sure there'll be some rental revenues as the building goes forward. Will the city get any of that rental revenue in exchange for the maps our citizens paying for the building?
The agreement with the fairgrounds is in place, and basically they maintain and run it and offset and do other improvements out there with the revenue that they have. So it doesn't anticipate, that's not what the agreement says. The agreement says that they take and put any excess revenues that they have into the
The agreement
operations,
didn't
into the
provide for
capital.
the citizens to build buildings out there, did it?
I'm sorry?
The agreement that we signed with the fair people did not include additional buildings paid for by the taxpayers?
I don't believe specifically.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Is there a sunset on that agreement, or is it renegotiated at some point?
Actually, I think we're 5 or 6 years into a 20-year agreement, and they would like to see it expanded because they're doing some agreements out there with some of their horse shows that would exceed the life of the 14 years. And so I think there's some discussions going on to extend that agreement back to a full 20, so they can do some long-term agreements.
But you could renegotiate while you're changing it, you could renegotiate some things.
That's possible.
Thanks.
All right, Alan, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And next up, the Whitewater facility.
It is, and we have Jeffrey Guston here with S2O to do the presentation on the Whitewater facility.
Good morning. My name is Jeffrey Guston with S2O Design and Engineering. We're the engineers for the project and represent the design team. Thank you again for the opportunity to be in front of you to discuss such a wonderful project. The last time we were here was at the conclusion of preliminary report, and the design itself has stayed consistent with that presentation, so I will not belabor you with all the details of the design, but try to just give you some highlights of where we have been over the last few months. ahead and make it move. There we go. So we have here is an overall view of the master site plan for the riverfront project. You'll see the whitewater course there, starting at Phillips Avenue, extending east to the highway, and then north to Fifth Street. Part of the project as well will be the conclusion of the parking along Sixth Street, leading up to Phillips, as well as some parking to the north of Fifth Street. This is a rendering looking back from Phillips to the east. Again, you'll see the main building, which is roughly 16,000 square feet, designed to be 2 stories. So the structure will accommodate a second floor in the future. The construction of the building under our project is just the first floor build out, which again is 16,000 square feet. I'll give you kind of an indication on the uses as we go forward. Main entry is off of Phillips. You'll see the entry plaza there in the foreground. The whitewater course, the lower pond working its way along, paralleling the river, the pump station in the background, and the 2 channels wrapping back around along Fifth Street to the front of the facility.
Does the trail system then run between the river and the whitewater facility?
The trail system comes down along the river, and at the last bit, right before it gets to the main building, it cuts back in front along Phillips and runs Phillips and then down Fifth Street.
I see. So it's not between the whitewater.
No, and the reason we did that was there's a fence line that goes around the course to basically control it, and that fence line starts, essentially the river is our barrier, then the building, then a fence along Phillips, a fence down Fifth Street, all the way to the terminus at the channel over there. So basically a way to control it.
Well, maybe you just answered it. Is there pedestrian access between, can you walk between the river and the whitewater facility?
During operations, the gates are essentially open, so it's a free flow in and out of the site. During off hours, the gates will be shut, so there is no access down along the river at that point.
Okay.
This is the grading plan. Only thing I wanted to show on this one here is, again, the extents of the project. You'll see to the west, we're including the extension of the Sixth Street parking. To the north along Fifth Street, you'll see the parking, the additional parking to the north there. The course itself. And essentially, there's a lot of tight grade along the inlets to the east, along the river, and we'll be bringing in essentially 100,000 cubic yards of import from the Oliver Park facility. So we're working through that. This is an enlargement of the entry plaza. Again, what you have here, the main building, again, being 16,000 square feet, that gray highlighted line going essentially through the building is kind of the main entrance to the facility. So along that path, there's a series of architectural elements, an entry fountain that's not only signage, but it's a wayfinding, kind of pushing the individuals to the front door. Along that path, it's also fire access to all of our buildings on the site. Along the path, you'll see some benches, some pedestrian lighting, vegetation, and whatnot, guiding everyone to the front door. This is a rendering looking back across the lower pond. The building, the main building there is to the back, and then to the left would be the rafting facility. The rafting facility, again, serves 2 functions. One, it's an orientation pavilion for doing a short video and instructional training for patrons before they get into the raft. And then the second portion of it is for gearing, essentially operational procedures. The planting plan. Of note on this is there's quite a bit of vegetation in our plans. A lot of taller trees along the southern shores of the channels to give some shade, and some of your more dense lower vegetation to the north. The inner island, that's kind of the triangle right in the middle between the 2 channels, is designed essentially to accommodate small events. So we could, during competition channel events, we could probably get about 6,000 to 8,000 people out on the island. There's a series of bridges here too. They don't show very well on this drawing, but coming out of the main building there, you'll see a double line going across into the inner channel, all the way to over to the second island, and then all the way up to Fifth Street. So there's continuity across the site. Lighting plan, again, varying light levels, all the way from building lighting to entrance lighting along Phillips, pedestrian lighting. The bridges will be lit. Along the river, there's some low pedestrian lights. We have made some accommodations for course lighting as an alternate for the project. We've been able to take advantage of the existing river course lights, the high mast lights, to light off of the backside of that to provide us ample lighting for the whitewater course. And then also using some pole lights off of Fifth Street as well to kind of get that northern side. Another rendering, this is looking back from one of the bridges. This is the western bridge towards the main building, so that's the main building in the background. Again, a two-story space, 16,000 on the ground floor, and roughly about 12,000 square feet to go up on the second floor in the future. This is the main building, first floor plan. Essentially, it serves a few functions. The main entrance would be towards it's actually turned a little bit on the plan here, but you can see the double line towards the top is that shaded line that you've seen before in the plans. That's your main entry. So you're coming into essentially a large retail space. There's varying restaurant opportunities, little cafe. You'll see a couple booths there in the corridor. That's just kind of a grab-and-go type operation. There's outdoor seating for restaurant as well as for viewing. And then to the right of the sheet is your more formal sit-down restaurant type thing to a white tablecloth at night that can be converted and scaled in operation. Kitchen just behind that, and then in the middle of the page is essentially your operations for the facility. This elevation of the main building, again, very similar to what we've shown before and consistent with the architecture that's already out there. Metal panels, this is a metal shingle panel that slightly different, but the same type of finish that you're seeing on the Devon Boathouse and the Finish Line Tower. Schedule, very similar to what was just presented with the fairgrounds, actually. We're ready to go to bid, and we think we can have this thing awarded by the end of July, going into construction in August. We're projecting a 16-month construction schedule, so finishing end of 2015. I know there's been some push from operations in trying to get this thing sooner, so we've made some accommodations in our bid to potentially move the completion date 30, 60, and 90 days earlier, and obviously there'll be a premium for that, but we'd like to try to get this thing done by end of 2015, so it's up and running strong in 2016. And then I don't have a slide for it, but I'll briefly speak about our budget. Our construction budget from preliminary report was roughly about $24 million, and we're on par with that. What we've seen, what the completion of the drawings to date, we've done a few things over the last couple months, and primarily one of the things we did was, this project is new for a lot of people when we stay within the contracting community. So we went out and did what we called a pre-bid about 3 months ago. And we basically just, with the MAP staff and our staff, we basically just hosted an event open to the public to come in and learn about the project. And we had a pretty good turnout. We had about a dozen and a half contractors that showed up, and actually spent about 2 hours with them. And we used our experience in building the Charlotte facility and basically walk them through a sequential process week by week through construction so that they can understand how this thing gets built. And I think it really kind of, when they left the room, they understood what this thing is. It's not something that can't be done. A little ingenuity to it, and it's certainly straightforward. So I think what we did with that is we educated the public a little bit about the project, and I think you're going to see that when we go out to bid. There's competent contractors out there looking for this. They don't see anything unique about it. They can break it down to its components. So I think we're going to see some good bids. That said, paralleling the process, the land acquisition has been complete. It's our understanding that the land was completed about $1.5 million over budget. So if we bid, the project comes in a bit where we're targeting, we're looking about $1.5 million potentially over budget when this thing bids. And it's my understanding from MAPS that if that happens, the subcommittee would come back and potentially look to bring some money forward from the MAPS 4 program to cover those overages.
No, there is no MAPS 4 project. No, we're going to come back and take a look at.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Phase 4, very good. Phase 4 out of the Riverfront program, yes, would be a more appropriate place.
I didn't understand that. So the expectation from the design group is that it can't fit the budget, or it can fit the budget?
Construction will fit the budget. There's different buckets of money, so to speak, within the overall budget.
For the river.
We had a $23.8 million construction budget. We think it's going to bid at that number.
I see.
Right, we anticipated a budget amount for the land acquisition, and the appraisals came in a little higher, and then when we did the condemnation, the awards were a little higher. So we're about $1 million, $1.5 million over budget on the land itself. So in order to balance all that out, we need to shift some from Phase 4, which we did a little bit on the Phase 2 projects.
I see. So the $60 million roughly that was appointed to the river improvements, that number, finite number, still is good.
That's right.
I see. But there are Phase 4 improvements as part of that that may or may not happen depending on the bidding on the Whitewater.
That's right, because the Phase 4 is really just for additional improvements to the Whitewater.
So
and
the
to
Whitewater is the priority, and then Phase 4 will deal with the money that is left over if there is anything.
Absolutely.
Okay. I just want to make sure that that's clear. All right. Any other questions? All right, David, I had a question for David. It seemed to me, when I'm looking here at the bottom of the slide that's currently up, there's a lot of contractors and subs. Is this a larger number than we typically have to deal with on one project?
I don't think so. What you're seeing is electrical, civil, all the usual subconsultants that are with an architect. So it's not unusual. Now the Cloward H2O is a specialty consultant. But I believe they're the pumps, your pump guy and hydraulic guy. So there's a few special groups.
2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 7 groups, and that's typical for a project of this size?
Yeah, I mean, I would.
Yeah, these are all your
defer to
engineering
Jeffrey.
consultants. Essentially, when you build something like this, you have a wet environment and a dry environment. So you've kind of got a double team on that. From a construction perspective, this is bid as a lump sum general construction. It is a horizontal project with a building.
It just seems a little bit, it requires more management, I mean, to try and make sure they're all communicating with each other and make sure that the budgets are staying intact.
We've done this before. If it's a good contractor, it'll run seamless, just like any other project. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but again, I think that we're over that a little bit right now.
Well, have these groups typically worked together on other projects, or are all of these brought together for the first time?
No, Cloward, S2O, the local consultants, Elliott and Triad's first time, but the other 3 have worked together.
Okay,
Elliott and Triad work together on other projects,
right.
both ways.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, looks like we're ready to vote the consent docket. No other comments or questions from council? All right, cast your votes. Consent docket passes unanimously. This time I'd like to move up item 8O. This is a revocable right-of-way use permit for OKC Fest LLC, and I notice Fred Hall's in the building. Fred, would you come forward and tell us more about OKC Fest? I know it's rapidly approaching on the calendar.
It is. Mayor, council, city manager, appreciate your opportunity to be here and go for this permit. Thank you very much for assisting us with this permit with a outdoor music festival. Where do you park 30 tour buses of musicians coming into play? There have been some interesting things, and I appreciate all the city staff's work with us on this. We believe this is the first of many annual music festivals that can bring in a whole new music industry into Oklahoma City. We think that this can bring in production, bring in music scholarship. Any net proceeds that we use that we have over and above what we have in ticket sales go back into this community in music scholarships, music equipment, music instruments. The promoters of this, our organization, will not take 1 penny of this proceeds for anything other than the betterment of Oklahoma City and our music industry in Oklahoma City. So June 27, 28th, we have quite a lineup of country musicians coming into Oklahoma City that I think will make news worldwide, and we look forward to putting this kind of a music endeavor on every year in Oklahoma City.
Comments or questions from Fred? Fred, how much land are you going to need for this for the first year?
So I think we're using 5 city blocks.
And if people are concerned, as they typically are with big downtown projects, about parking or traffic, how would you address those concerns?
We've worked with the city on traffic. We think that there are good flows, no streets are permanently down. Parking is right next door. We have 5 parking lots adjacent to this music festival.
It's amazing how quickly they put this together for the size of, they didn't start slow the first year.
Yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot too much. Can you mention some of the acts that'll be coming as part of this?
Yes, I mean, we have, first of all, on Friday, we have 5 acts starting at 5 o'clock that Scotty McCrary, Josh Abbott, Randy Rogers, we finished that day with Merle Haggard from Oklahoma, who's been on 2 straight CMA award shows, and then Dierks Bentley. And then on Saturday, we have another quite tremendous lineup that ends with Lady Antebellum. All through the weekend, there are free music going on in 2 different stages at the Myriad Garden. We've got our Oklahoma artists that are performing all over that, from bluegrass to gospel to Wanda Jackson to Graham Colton. So the Oklahoma artists that we're also allowing, that will be free at the Myriad Gardens.
That's great. And then it winds up when, on Sunday?
On Saturday night with the main stage, and on Sunday with gospel and alt Latina show on the Myriad Garden for free.
All right. Any other comments or questions for Fred? All right. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously.
Thank you all very much.
Fred, good luck and thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Why don't we also move up, I noticed Vicki Gorley is here, move up the presentation on Sister Cities from the city manager reports. Vicki? Vicki came in early this morning bringing in a contingent of people from Haikou, China. I know it's been an early morning for her.
Good morning, Mayor,
Morning.
again, and Council. Thank you for having me today. As the Mayor just mentioned, we've just had an official delegation led by the Director General of Foreign Affairs from Haikou, China. Haikou is a city of 6 million people, the 6th richest city in China, and everyone in the state has been all over us. Last night we hosted a dinner for 45 people, paying people, Chairman of the State Chamber, the Governor's International Team, Corporation Commissioner Bob Anthony, University of Oklahoma, Sharon Go, head of their Confucius Institute. We arranged for them to tour and meet with the University of Oklahoma, and they're at the chamber right now before their flight. They worked out some agreements with the University of Oklahoma and their university, and I think it was a very successful meeting. You all received an invitation to the dinner last night. I know it was late notice because their first letter to us came in Chinese and everybody thought it was spam. So we only had a week to put this all together. But we had some very important people here with great possibilities for the city. And I'm not sure that the council realizes that we forward you these emails and you forward us some, but that when we are contacted, when Sister Cities organization is contacted, it's always by city officials or state officials, and they think they're dealing with you, not a bunch of old lady volunteers. So we need to work on that. Mayor Ron Norick, who signed the agreement with Haikou, was kind enough to save face for them and come to the dinner last night since Mayor Cornett already had plans. But it's very important for these officials, especially the Chinese, to feel like they are respected by their sister city. I'm here to report to you on our activities of this year and how we met our goals. The Board of Directors held our regular board meetings in accordance with our adopted bylaws. I was elected president last June. Our other officers were elected. And we had a volunteer redesign our website and is keeping it up, and we are receiving correspondence on it. Dues were paid to the National Sister Cities International Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce. The post office box rental was paid. The board members met with delegations from Rwanda, our sister city, Kigali, in June. I think many of you are aware that Terry Neese founded the Peace Through Business organization, and she is on our board and sees to it that these women come to Oklahoma City each year. They did thousands of dollars worth of business with our merchants, and many of them bought the stock for their stores in Kigali from our merchants. And we facilitated, with the help of Terry, making these contacts. 4 Sister Cities board members have visited Kigali, Rwanda on their own, paying their own expenses during the past year. In September, Carol Sander, who's on our board, her husband Gary, and I traveled to Kigali. We were hosted by the vice mayor of Kigali at a dinner at which 60 people attended. Oklahoma City has a lot of ties with Kigali, primarily due through the efforts of Oklahoma Christian University, and we are exporting educators and a number of goods to them. Their primary exports are tea and coffee, and there's not much of a relationship for there, but we have the 32 agencies different agencies have drilled water wells. They're setting up a university there. That tie was and remains very strong. In March, County Commissioner and former President of the Sister Cities Board, Brian Mon, went with Terry Neese to Kigali, met with the Department of Corrections, and we then later came back and met with the mayor. They have adopted the Commissioner's Shine program in Rwanda and are in the process of implementing that nationwide now. So that's been a big benefit for them, and I think quite a coup for Oklahoma City. We also registered and attended the Emerging Leaders Conference for Rwanda at Oklahoma Christian University. Deanna Bradley attended the Asian Society dinner and hosted members of the Taipei Sister Cities delegation at our Cinco de Mayo party last year. We were in touch with Heiko, and as I just told you, have finished inviting them here. They would like for a delegation to come there and are offering to host us. Sister Cities paid for their delegation's hotel rooms, meals, and banquet out of some of the proceeds we were able to make off our Global Visions Award this year. We've worked together to further the mission of Sister Cities, and Terry Neese was the recipient of our Global Visions Award. Unfortunately, the timing worked out to where no one from the city was able to attend, I believe because of the Chamber's retreat that day. Major General Rita Aragon was our MC. Governor Fallon filled in for the mayor and presented the award to Terry Neese. We had sponsorships from AT&T, T. Boone's Pickens Foundation, a local oil service company, and that's where we made our money. Owen Love's Country Stores, McDonald Land Services. New members and sponsors were Mr. and Mrs. Richard L. Sias, Ann Simmons Allspa, Habitat for Humanity, Terry Neese Personnel, Judy Love from Love's Country Stores. So we felt like that we have accomplished the mission of involving corporations with us. The entire honorary consular corps attended except for one, and we were able to host them out of the proceeds. They've also agreed to be on our advisory board. The 2013-14 contract began our third year to raise funds for our program, and we developed the list of one of our goals of corporations that I have just read you. We have also had contact with and some sponsorship or interaction. We have a good relationship with the South Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce. They trade their membership in Sister Cities for including us on their liability policy. The Jewish Federation and the Oklahoma Israel Exchange have been active with us. Bank First, Oklahoma City Community College, Councilman Salyers, SL Financial, Chesapeake Energy, the Norwick Foundation, Oklahoma City University is interested in pursuing some relationship with us in regard to some of our sister cities. We have stayed in touch with the Boathouse. Their Brazil's rowing team is training here. Their coach is here about half of the year. That is contributing greatly to the economy of Oklahoma City. That's not primarily due to sister cities. Mike Knopp and the fame of our facility here is what first attracted them, but the fact that Rio is a sister city of Oklahoma City has facilitated their being able to bring people back and forth, and the enthusiasm for them coming to Oklahoma City. Sister cities, all of our sister cities feel as if they are welcome in Oklahoma City, that it's a safe place for them to come, it's a safe place for them to send their children to college. These foreign students are very important to all of our universities. And we're here today to ask you for funding for another year. I believe we were less than $4,000 in reimbursements this year. It was just the Global Vision Award itself, our chamber dues, and our international dues. And we would also like to find some way to develop a closer connection with the city. As I said, these people believe they are dealing with city officials, and this is in no way a threat. We all enjoy entertaining them and love what we do on sister cities. But the state, Tulsa, the governor, are poaching contacts that we have made through your sister cities for them to do business. And we need your help in facilitating that business coming strictly to Oklahoma City. Thank you for your time today.
Questions for Vicki?
At one point, was this under the purview of the Oklahoma City Chamber?
I was not on the board then. My understanding is that at one point, the city and the chamber actively supported sister cities as an economic development tool. Then the chamber has formed an organization of their own. I asked Roy Williams if we could help or about if we could get together, and he said you would have to talk to the mayor. Our two delegates to the International Convention in San Antonio last summer reported that they could find no other sister city organization out there operating on their own as just a bunch of volunteers. Tulsa has combined their global partners, sister cities, and the University of Tulsa and the city. Fort Worth, sister cities, work strictly with the city on a budget of $150,000 a year. The way we're operating right now is not conducive to us being able to do anything but spread goodwill and get you a little bit of business.
Well, I'm just wondering, because, I mean, we spend millions and millions of dollars to the Chamber for economic development. This seems like an economic development tool. I mean, there should be...
It should be, but what we're doing is acting as your welcome wagon and city hosts.
What would be the advantages and disadvantages of it being under the city's purview versus the chambers?
In most cases, the advantage of the city is that your sister cities' delegations are city officials, and they expect to meet with city officials.
But you could
The chamber, in most cases, I think the chamber is also involved in Tulsa. I can bring you some models and would like to have someone on the council to take us under their wing and let me bring you some models of how other cities have done it. But, we could all just quit and go join the International Visitors Association. But we really enjoyed the prestige of being able to represent the city and think a lot more could be done to further economic development, either by us partnering with the chamber, but you're going to have to make them, because they have taken the money they used to finance sister cities with for their own organization.
Any other comments or questions? All right.
Thank you very much
Vicki,
for your
thank you.
time.
We appreciate your work. Back on item 7 of the council agenda, this is the concurrence docket.
I'd like to pull out X and vote on that separately if we could.
Sure.
And just a comment about that. This is a $3.5 million investment, apparently, which is sizable. It's about 20 years of our social services budget. That's far in excess of what we're trying to put together for evening public transit and police officers. Two things I think the taxpayer should know. One is that it's really inaccurate to say that today we are authorizing negotiation of an economic development agreement. I mean, these agreements are really negotiated, in my mind, before they ever get to this point. I was told about a month ago, as I have been on similar, Von Maur and others, a journalist is about to break the story. We're going to offer $3.5 million. We believe the entity wants to be in Oklahoma City. They are competitors with Bass Pro, Dick's Sporting Goods, Academy. They're the only one not in this market. It's a strong market. We believe they want to be here. But to keep them in Oklahoma City limits versus another municipality, we're going to offer $3.5 million. So these deals are, to me, negotiated before we're having resolutions like this. What is very honest, I don't know that I've seen it, is that the resolution says that this is to support the development within the city limits of Oklahoma City. We're not talking about doing something that wouldn't happen, but for the incentive, like a grocery store in a food desert. This is to keep this within the city limits, with the implicit threat that if we didn't pay the $3.5 million, that it could go to another municipality like Yukon or some other. So to me, I guess the question I have is how would that not fall within the definition of extortion? Extortion is a criminal offense if this were in the private sector. Extortion is a criminal offense in which you obtain money, property, or services from a person, entity, or institution through coercion. And if you use the internet or cross state lines, it's a federal offense. How would this not meet that definition? That we're basically being told, we want to come to Oklahoma City. We think we do very well. We don't need the incentive, to make the store work. But if we're not paid this $3.5 million, we're going to have to look at one of your surrounding municipalities, which would imply harm. To me, that's extortion. And I think we need to think long and hard about what we're doing in this process and what may follow. I mean, this follows the Von Maur incentive. And what is next? We hold the cards. The economy is strong. We're in the middle of an oil and gas revolution. We're oil and gas heavy. They want to be here. They're the only outlier in this with Bass Pro and Dick's Sporting Goods and Academy. So they want to be here. I think at some point you've got to resist. This is basically bullies in the school ground wanting our lunch money, right, and bullying us. And the only way that you make that stop is not to kneel and ask how much it will take to appease them. Is $3.5 million enough to appease you so that you'll be within our city limits? It's at some point you have to resist and you have to say no. And then the other bullies in the school ground decide not to try and take your lunch money anymore. If you did decide, and I absolutely will not kneel and will not vote for this today, but if you did decide to do something like this, you could look to cities like Austin, who are negotiating things. If they give incentives, they're negotiating all kinds of community values. Austin recently, safety training, health benefits, living wages, same-sex partner benefits, minority contracting, payroll transparency. There's all kinds of things that you could at least try and get, which you felt like you wanted as a community value. But we're not asking for any of that. We're simply writing a check. And I just implore the council to reject this today, but if not rejecting this, then really to think about what path we're going down, because this follows Von Maur. This is our fourth retail incentive package. The amount of millions of dollars is adding up, and I'd ask that we continue the discussion. Thanks.
Okay.
Extortion is a strong word. I think we'd ask Kenny to see if there
Yeah.
are legal issues out.
It's not extortion. Extortion is a crime. That's a defined criminal term.
I understand, and I said that in the private sector, I think this would be a criminal offense. I understand that it's not, we're not in the private sector. But metaphorically, it feels very much like extortion. And I understand it's a strong term, and I'm using it deliberately. You are, I'm not implying that it rises to a level that the law would allow that this is a criminal offense. But it is clearly trying to obtain money, property, or services from an entity through coercion, in my mind. Thank you.
Dr. Sneed, have you read the actual contract between the city and retail entity that's coming in? So you haven't read, you don't know what terms are in there, what we have been able to negotiate?
Sat me down and provided a paper outlining all the terms and what they've told me verbally.
And they didn't mention any negotiations during that time?
They did. They said that for many months these negotiations have been going on, and this is what.
In terms of what the actual contract includes, they didn't brief you on that?
Yes, they did.
Well, you know, there were some of the items you mentioned that were prevalent in the Austin agreement also they were included in this agreement.
If that's in there, I didn't know about that.
Like the transparency of the payroll, for instance. Our whole incentive is subject to them meeting certain guidelines.
Okay.
Are you aware of those guidelines?
Well, what we're voting on today is to authorize negotiations. I mean, it sounds to me like
Well, this is a concurrence docket item, as I understand it.
of something that was approved by the Economic Development Trust last week.
Which the city council doesn't have any authority to vote against.
Okay.
That was my understanding of what the concurrence docket meant. We could not turn it down.
Why do we call this authorizing negotiation? I mean, you're saying there's a written contract with all of these different provisions that have been hammered out. Why don't we just say ratifying the contract and then provide that contract to all of us in our weekly supporting documents?
I think you need to talk to the city municipal councilor and the secretary to get the wording changed.
Okay, I will.
What? Oh, go for it, Larry.
Yeah, Larry?
Jim, a quick question. There is a retail policy that the council has adopted, did we not, several years ago?
Yes, sir.
And did not that policy include the opportunity with certain criteria being met that incentives would be offered if the retailer met those particular criteria?
Yes, sir.
And does not this particular agreement fit within that? Is there anything in the potential agreement here that it deviates from that retail incentive policy?
No, it clearly falls within the criteria. We've, since it's been adopted, since I've been city manager, we've done 4 retail projects, retail incentives. The first one was Bass Pro, second one was the Outlet Mall, the third one was Von Maur, and this is the 4th one that we've done. But this is not something we do on a regular basis. Our retail policy is very narrow compared to a lot of our competing cities in that realm. We understand some of the concerns and issues associated with retail incentives, and we go into it very deliberately.
And not only do we go into it deliberately, there are some of us who sit on that particular trust who wished we did not have to get involved in retail incentives. But up to this point, every retail incentive that we have offered, whether you're for retail incentives or not, every one that we've offered has brought back to the city benefits in excess of the amount of the incentive that was offered. Is that not true?
The first 2 have.
The first two.
2 have. Those are the only.
The third one is not
only 2 that are
open
on
yet, and the
street,
fourth
yeah.
one is what we're talking
correct.
about. So this is a deliberate process that it goes on. I think the taxpayers should know that, and it's not extortion. I particularly reject that because as a participant, being told that I'm involved in extortion kind of offends me a little bit, quite frank. It's a legitimate business approach. You may or may not agree with incentivizing retail, but as a council, we voted to allow a council a council agenda item to go through and approve that we would, under certain conditions, incentivize retail, and that's all we're doing, is following through with the previous, and when was that passed? Several years ago, wasn't it, Jim?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there's a way, if you don't want to incentivize, rather than call people who are asking for incentives, trying to get bribes to move in here, I think you ought to go back to the source, and if you want to debate again whether we should incentivize retail, that's open for public debate at the council, is it not, Jim?
Certainly.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yeah, James?
I'm certainly not a fan of incentivizing retail also, but whenever we look at the system, how it's set up, I wouldn't call it extortion, I'd call it competition. It's how the system's set up is it's set up for cities to compete against each other. And I don't think that's necessarily a healthy competition because it's basically set up to where cities get into the private market and influence companies to do what we want them to do because we want them to be within our municipal boundaries. So, I always try and look at a solution to that problem. So like for me, the state legislature loves to take power away from us. So, I mean, if they want to, an easy solution to this is that the state government start to say that you can't incentivize retail, and then that puts all of the cities on the same playing field, and then the free market is able to place their business where they want to place it without retail incentives. So if we want to look at a solution, that's the only solution I've come up with. But as the system is now, I think that we as a city need to do what we need to do to get them to be within our district. And the amount that we're incentivizing is less. And the bottom line is they're coming to our market. We want them within our city. And the only negative, in my view, is that it will cannibalize some of Dick's and Academy's sales. The fact that it's going to cannibalize Bass Pro is kind of irrelevant to me because they've got incentives as well. So, and they're really their chief competitor, Cabela's and Bass Pro. So that's my view on it.
Mm-hmm. And it really all gets back to kind of what you're saying, James. The state is forcing municipalities to compete for retail because our general fund dollars come largely from sales tax, and then 2/3 of our general fund goes to police officers and firefighters. So if you want police officers and firefighters, you've got to protect your general fund, and this is to protect our general fund. And there are two types of business incentives. There's one type of incentives that we've used for job creation, and there's another type for sales tax. And retail is not about job creation. There are jobs, but they're not worth going out to compete for. But the sales tax is worth going out to compete for.
But if the legislature passed a law, as our councilman here suggested, it wouldn't protect us from competition from Austin's of the world or Dallas's of the world or someplace else.
No, but it
That's
would
true.
keep
It
us
would
from
put it-
chasing Walmart to put them on this side of the street or that side of the street, which is not a healthy planning.
No, but I don't think
method.
we ought to leave that to the legislature, leave it to chance.
Yeah, well, but it's the funding aspect of it that's really at the root of it. It's making cities reliant on sales tax. That's forcing these types of competition.
Which is a much bigger problem than just retail incentives.
Yeah, and we've presented that to them, several years, and they don't seem to be any closer to changing it than they were when we first started talking to them.
I wasn't necessarily advocating for that plan either. Whenever I complain about a policy or something, I try to have at least an idea, and that's the only idea that I have. I would like to have a better one, but
Mayor, along that line, I think the way to get the legislature to come out against incentive would be for Oklahoma City to come out in favor of it. I mean, given our recent history at the legislature, we should be big advocates for this, and the legislature will then want to take away our power to do this, and maybe we could win this fight. But to even give oxygen that some whale needs who's surfacing out in the middle of the ocean is going to die from the lack of oxygen, that we're wasting here talking about getting the legislature to help us with incentive programs. It's almost sinful. If we want something done with the legislature, we need to propose exactly the opposite. That's about the only way to get anything done out there, it looks like to me.
I would just, final point, I think to James's point that the incentive is less, Cabela's extracts this money from countless municipalities. It's basically part of the corporate business plan. And the fact that it is less in Oklahoma City than they've extracted from other municipalities, to me means they want to be here. This project on Kilpatrick Turnpike in Western has been in the works. You could have read about it for over about a year on different blogs. They clearly want to be at that site. They're coming to that site regardless of whether we give this incentive or not. That you bring in more money than the incentive assumes that they wouldn't have done it but for the incentive, and I don't think that applies in this case.
I do believe that applies in this case. I know for a fact that the site was not selected until the last 10 days, 2 weeks on it. And so I just respectfully disagree with you on that point, Councilman.
We have a motion and a second on the consent docket. Why don't we just remove item X from that motion? Is that good enough? Okay, so the vote we're about to take is for the consent docket except for item X, and then we'll vote on item X separately.
What would happen if we voted against it? It's a concurrence docket. I understand my explanation years ago with the concurrence docket, we had no real voice in whether we approved or disapproved. Is that the case?
Well, it would be a message back to the Economic Development Trust that the council has issues with the overall policy, but that in effect, the Economic Development Trust still has the authority to go forward.
All right. This vote is for the consent docket minus X. The concurrence docket minus X. Thank you, Francis. And it passes unanimously. Now, does someone want to make a motion on item X? All right. Voting on item X, and it passes.
Thank you.
7-1. We're on to item 8. These are items that require a separate vote. First is a series of zoning cases. Item 8A1 is in Ward 6. It's an AB3 issue at 914 North Broadway Avenue. Is anyone here hoping to speak on this item today? Are you the applicant? Is there anyone here against this application? Okay, why don't you just go ahead and give us a...
Tyler Woods, representing Reduction Theater Company, the applicant. We're a small 100-seat theater over on North Broadway. We just opened up in February, and we do classics, musicals, children's shows. But one of the things we like to offer is the ability for our patrons to have a glass of wine or a cocktail while they enjoy the show. So that's what we're applying for in this circumstance.
Okay. Is there a motion on item 8A1? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 8A2 is a zoning case in Ward 8. The address is 14620 Mezzaluna Avenue. It's currently a plan unit development. Will become a new PUD. Pat?
Thank you, Your Honor. Madam Secretary, did anybody sign up to speak? The applicant's here, and you want to come forward and say a word or two about your project?
Good morning, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. I also have Will Ralph with the development group and Tim Johnson with me. This is a PUD application for a multifamily project immediately north of Quail Springs Mall, and it's one that we've been working on for quite some time. I know in the past there was a lot of concern about the density and the number of apartment complexes here, and so part of what we did was we came to an agreement with the developer of the property around our site's right here in the middle, that in conjunction with this PUD, we have submitted a administrative amendment request that would become effective if this is approved, reducing the amount of lots allowed in the balance of this land by the same number that we're getting approved here, so there would be no increase in density from what's already approved right now. What we have proposed is a mix of garden apartments and the big house concept. So our density, when you look at what R4 typically allows, being 34, it will be relatively low. It'll be under 20 dwelling units per acre. So we think it's a project that will be a real success in this area.
Are there any questions of the developer? If not, Your Honor, I move for approval.
Second.
Cast your votes on item 8A2. Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Item 8A3 is a zoning case in Ward 1 at 10701 North Rockwell Avenue. It too is a plan unit development and become a new simplified plan unit development. James?
Does anybody sign up? Okay. Yeah, the current PUD is has a base zoning of 01. It currently has 2 medical office buildings. This SPUD doesn't change any of that. The only thing it changes is that it adds a restaurant use, basically in between those 2 offices. Planning Commission unanimously approved it. I feel like it's compatible as well. I think they've agreed to all the TEs, correct? So I move for approval.
All right. We are voting on item 8A3. Cast your votes. It passed unanimously. Item 8B has been deferred until July 15th. Item 8C is closing of a utility in Ward 8. It's between 165th and part of 166th Street in Bluff Canyon.
Francis, anybody sign up on this one? Is the developer here? Representative? Are there any questions of Tom about this project? It's a relatively straightforward project.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates. Yeah, this is a part of this is an old plat, an old zoning case that the development never really occurred. So we've come back with a new developer. We've already approved the zoning for the area, and part of the new concept is going to let us use the existing improvements that have been there, but we're going to make them private so we can have on-street parking to serve a better office, warehouse type complex. So as part of that, we need to vacate these streets and easements.
Are there any questions of the applicant? I move for approval.
Second.
All right, we're voting on item 8C. Cast your votes. It passed unanimously. Item 8D is another issue in Ward 1. This is to operate an auto dealership on 39th Street.
Yeah, this is a special permit. Did anybody sign up for this one? Okay, there was one protest letter just talking about how many car dealerships are already there. That almost supports the application, really, because it makes it more compatible. So if there's not any questions, I move for approval.
All right, we're voting on item 8D. Cast your votes. It passed unanimously. Item 8E is an issue that's up for final hearing today. 3rd time it's been before the council. This has to do with parking for physically disabled. Is there a motion? All right, cast your votes on item 8E. It passed unanimously. Item 8F is also to us for the 3rd time, has gone through the public hearing process. This is for the makeup and membership of the Design Review Committee. Motion? Cast your votes on 8F. It passed unanimously. And item 8G is also here for a final hearing. 3rd time it's been before the council, and this has to do with some regulations involving the HP district. Cast your votes, and it passed unanimously. Item 8H is a public hearing on an item that's been introduced to the council, and this has to do with the petty cash that takes place at the Development Center. Is there anyone here hoping to speak on item 8H today? All right, how about a motion then? Cast your votes. It passed unanimously. Item 8I is a new ordinance that's going to be introduced today. Susan Randall is going to come forward and talk to us a little bit more about some child care issues and getting us in, I guess, in alliance with the state law.
Well, let me go through some of our amendments. Susan Randall with the City Attorney's Office. I also have with me here Kathy Crone-Miller, who's the chairman of the City County Board of Health of Governors, and we have Philip Maytubby and Mackenzie Roberts with the City County Health Department, as well as various staff members if you have any questions. And just to go kind of through the process of what we've done, we had several meetings over the past year to try to update our ordinance and to have new terminology and also to make it more consistent with some of the state laws. We held a meeting on November 19th where the board recommended approval of these changes. After that meeting, we felt that we needed to go out and get some comments from the public, if there were any. So we sent out notices to all of our current child care licensees and also put the ordinance on our website for anyone to comment on. We came back in February and had a meeting to address any of the concerns or comments, and there was no one from the public that showed up and had any concerns with the ordinance. So I'll just kind of go briefly through some of the amendments that we made. And then if you have any questions, I have people here to answer some of those if you need to. The main thing we did was to just update a lot of our terminology. This ordinance was very old, and we used the term nursery throughout. And we deleted that term and used childcare throughout the ordinance. We amended the definition of childcare. We reduced that from 8 to more than 5. And the reason that we did that was because the city's building codes and fire codes used that number as their category for occupancy throughout the building and fire codes. So we wanted to be more consistent with that. We also reduced the age in that definition from 18 to 15 because DHS allows children that are 15 to work in the centers. So we tried to be more consistent with that. We deleted some definitions that really were kind of obsolete and weren't needed anymore. Since we changed our definition of child care center and reduced that to more than 5, we did that throughout the ordinance on the other definitions. So large family child care home is now 6 to 12. We also used some of the DHS language to, I guess, clarify how those numbers are calculated. We changed the definition of operator so that that would be easier to prosecute and have more people in charge. As far as with the part-time child care, we also amended that to be consistent. We deleted some of the food. There was a prohibition against food service being provided, and we deleted that because a lot of those type of programs get food donated through the food bank, and so we wanted them to be able to have that type of food. We amended the penalty provision just to come into compliance with the current state law in our city code. We did some procedural things as far as with the Board of Governors meetings. They used to be quarterly, and now we have just changed that to an annual meeting, and also to have special meetings whenever it's necessary. The rest of them were mainly just updating as far as we changed some of the numbers as far as minimum standards to comply with the DHS standards, such as the heat index and those type of things. We also deleted the whole section relating to the care of infants and toddlers because we were not really inspecting on those type of things. That was done by DHS. We deleted the requirement for the vehicle inspection stickers because that's no longer required by state law. And that's basically the amendments that we made. And I have people here if you have any questions.
Okay. Any comments or questions today? We're going to have a public hearing on this next week.
So the change from 8 to 6 is not, it's not something we have to do. Is that right?
It is not something that we have to do. We wanted to be more consistent with the building codes. The state law still is at 8.
What do you mean be more consistent with the building codes?
The building code has different categories, how they categorize child care centers by occupancies, and they use the number 5 or more. So they're categorized as far as like either an E or an I4 or an I2 use. And in those uses, then it depends on how many children they have, but that's where you get to what you're required for in your fire and egress.
But this is
I have Mike Wilson here if there's any more detail on that.
But this will apply to somebody's home, right? Not, like, because this changes somebody's home designation from...
It really doesn't change anything from what we've already currently had. We do allow large family child care homes in the ordinance. However, we require those type of facilities to comply with the requirements of a child care center, right, which are more strict. So we do not currently have any licensed in Oklahoma City.
I'm lost. Okay, so I don't, we don't have anybody licensed to be a child care provider in their home? Is that what you're saying?
As far as the city of Oklahoma City, we do not license like home daycares of 5 or fewer. But we, as far as a large family child care home, we do not currently have any licensed. We allow that, but they have to meet the requirements of a child care center which are stricter.
If they're licensed? Or
If they want to be licensed, if they want to operate in Oklahoma City.
okay. So it sounds like when I read through the ordinance, it just sounds like what we're doing is we're changing it to where if somebody has 4 of their own kids and 2 of somebody else's kids in their house, then they have to fall under all of these same regulations that a child care center has, and that just seems weird to me. But I might be reading it wrong.
No, I think you're reading it correctly, but
Okay.
but what we're saying is that presently, that it's not mandated that way under the child care ordinance, but under the building codes, that if you have 6, then you've got to have the fire protection requirements that are in, which would be a sprinkler system and other things that are required to protect those children. And that's the trigger that's out there now. And so the trigger's already there for those provisions, and we're aligning those two.
Yeah. Larry?
Maybe a different question, or maybe it's the same. In the land use in a residential neighborhood, what can an individual do with his or her house as far as child care now or in the future?
Like I say, as far as the city's concerned, as long as you don't have more than 5, we don't regulate that in your own home. If it's more than that, then yes, they would have to come into compliance with the regulations. I don't know, did that answer your question?
The building code
go ahead.
regulation. The building code regulations, right?
Well, and the child care standards that we have in our ordinance.
Well, not if we don't pass, or, because right now it's 8 or more, right?
Correct.
For the child, for this part, but you're talking about building code. I'm lost.
Presently, the building code is a trigger. We're trying to align the child care ordinance with the trigger that's in the building code.
Now, the building code ordinance doesn't talk about that snacks shall be provided for, I mean, it doesn't, a lot of this stuff in here is just, you can't go outside if the heat index is over 100 degrees. You got hot water regulations. You got how to change diapers, how to properly, that you can't use a kid potty, and if you do, then you'd have to clean it immediately. Those sorts of things. I'm like, what, it's just
Those would be requirements.
Yeah.
Of any
child care facility, but it's not a requirement of somebody who's watching kids in their home.
Well, it is, and if they were,
If this passed, yeah.
well, even,
Yeah, if they have 8 kids or more, not if they had. That's the whole deal. It just.
Susan,
I would like to keep it at 8. How about that?
I wasn't planning on getting involved in this discussion, but with respect to the number, whether it's currently 8 or the proposed number of 5, is it based upon the number of children that are being paid to watch, or is it just a number? And so it could include your own children?
I believe it's a number, and then, like I say, if you're calculating the number of children, then that's where the ordinance talks about who you count and who you don't. So if you had 3 of your own kids under 5 years old, those would be counted towards your 6 to be a large family.
Or a
child care
foster
home.
kid, 12 and under.
Yes, and I don't, that was taken just from the state statutes from DHS. I don't know why those are like that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, the
Kathy-
item's just being introduced today, and there'll be a public hearing on June 17th.
Kathy Cromiller may want to come up and
It sounds like I'm making a big deal about the number,
Classify,
changing the
clarify
2
something.
kids, but it just is, I don't quite understand the need to reduce it more. I understand that the regulations for child care centers and things like that, it's just whenever it gets into somebody's home, it rubs me the wrong way.
I'm Kathy Cromiller, and I'm operator here in Oklahoma City and have 4 centers. And I also have been chairman on this committee for almost 25 years now. I do want to point out to you that the state of Oklahoma, the law is that you have to be regulated if you take 1 child for payment. So even though, and we have chosen in Oklahoma City not to regulate those and get them a city license if they're under a certain amount. But because of the state of Oklahoma, they still have to be registered and they have to get a state license. So even if you just keep one child in your home for payment, you're required by Oklahoma State statute to go ahead and get a license. I just wanted to make sure that you were clear that you had that information also.
And we encourage people to come back on June 17th if they have other comments on this issue. All right? How about a motion to move this forward? All right. It passes unanimously. Public hearing June 17th. It's set for final adoption on July 1st. Item 8J is a public hearing regarding dilapidated structures. Is there anyone here hoping to speak under any item listed under 8J? All right, how about a motion? Cast your votes. It passed unanimously. Item 8K is a public hearing regarding unsecured structures. Is there anyone here hoping to speak under any item listed under 8K? All right, how about a motion here? Cast your votes. It passed unanimously. Item 8L is a resolution adopting the 2014-2015 annual budget.
Thank you, Mayor. We've had, obviously, 3 Finance Committee meetings on this to go over the details, and another meeting where we introduced it. But Doug is going to just give us a little bit of the highlights of the budget and where we are today.
Right, what you have before you includes the changes we discussed last week. So the total number of additions in the police department is 40 additional positions there. It also includes the additional $1.3 million for transit enhancements that we discussed last week, again, that will be decided on as we move forward. This includes the additional revenue from last month's sales tax check that was better than expected. And so that not only changed the general fund, which gave us that extra funding there, but also the other funds that receive sales tax. The other positions that we discussed earlier through the finance presentations, the 7 additional positions in fire, other positions in parks, those things are all included as well. So we're looking again at about a $1.1 billion total. For the general fund, it's $415,048,224. And so with your approval here, this will set the budget to go into effect on July 1st. We'll file this with the state and follow all the procedures that way as well to get it official.
I would move the adoption of the budget, but I do have a question.
I'll second it.
My question is that has to do with the additional manpower that was created by the vacant and abandoned buildings thing. Do we have a timeline about what we're going to do about, obviously that revenue is not going to be there. Obviously the legislature is not going to permit us to do that within this fiscal year, the upcoming fiscal year. It seems to me very unlikely that that could happen. And is there just going to be a process where we just subtract that revenue from the proposed budget and therefore subtract the people, or?
We don't know at this point in time. We are working, we're not going to hire anybody until we've got a plan. Let me start there. We will bring back a plan to the council once we've developed a plan that you can approve as to what we can do. We don't know exactly what that is at this point because of the new legislation that was passed. Right. And so legal and the Development Center and planning and the city manager's office are working together to see what we can do, what our alternatives are, and we'll bring back something to you in the near future. So the 10 positions that are in there, we won't fill those until we've got a plan and we know exactly how that works.
One of my questions is, I'm not sure I quite recall the exact nexus between the revenue generated by the ordinance and the employees.
Right, there was about a $200 and some thousand shortfall that was general fund money that was adopted on that. So it was the money collected for the registration, so if you take about $200,000 more.
Okay, so if you take out the registration money, there's still $200,000 more in the in that budget.
At a baseline, we could keep that in and hire 3 or 4 inspectors and get it and do that. So that's
this following the vacant and abandoned, unsecured and dilapidated structure thing. I think that certainly ought to be considered to take that extra $200,000 and use it to hire code enforcement people. That's certainly a problem that you wouldn't have to talk to anybody on the council that wouldn't agree with you that that's a universal way to deal with the problem, because we all have it. So
I think that's where we look as a baseline. That's the minimum we'll do, and then we'll see if there's anything we can do beyond that, on top of that. But we'll have a recommendation to you.
And I think one thing that speaks positively for doing that, for that adjustment, is one of the complaints that the realtors had was that we already have laws on the books that we ought to be enforcing, and therefore we shouldn't do this. Well, I just wonder if they really want to be thrown in that briar patch, and I think this might be the opportunity to just do that. Start enforcing the law that's out there better with more manpower, with some more enthusiasm, and that might help us convince the realtors that this really was in their best interest to do it the way we propose to do it, as opposed to banning our ability to do it.
But if we were to take that approach, it may not be 4 new inspectors. It may be 2 inspectors, another prosecutor, and some more judicial help
I understand, and
to make that happen.
I'm not trying to micromanage that decision, but I think that ought to be in the process of deciding what to do with that. I think that's a good place to look at it. I think you'd probably find support around the horseshoe for that too.
So we got the team in place. We're going to evaluate, and we'll bring back some recommendations to council within the next month.
Okay.
All right, this is a public hearing on item 8L on the budget. Is there anyone here hoping to speak on this item? All right, any questions for Doug from the council? All right, how about a motion then to vote on item 8L? We have a second? Okay, cast your vote. It passed unanimously. Item 8M is a public hearing. This is our annual resolution to solidify the public safety sales tax. We'll be voting on fire and then police. This is also a public hearing. We have a motion and a second. Is there anyone here hoping to speak on item 8M? This is a public hearing regarding the public safety sales tax for the fire department.
Doug will give you just a quick summary of both resolutions, if you'd like.
Right, both of these resolutions are passed annually to govern the expenses out of the police and fire sales tax fund. These are based on the ballot language that was adopted by our citizens in 1989, and then to comply with the journal entry of judgment, we outline exactly what we're going to spend our money on each year in these 2 funds. The resolution that you adopt today is what sets, again, the parameters for the spending for fire and police out of the sales tax funds, and this is what gets audited at the end of each year to make sure the expenditures complied with the direction from council. And so they've outlined a number of projects for both police and fire that are identified here. I can answer some basic questions if you have any questions about those, but obviously the police and fire chief can get into more detail on those projects if you want to know more about what's included there.
Yeah, Ed, do you want to say something? Anybody else? All right. So Doug's basically making himself available, and of course the police chief and the fire chief are around too. We have a motion and a second on item 8M. Are we ready to vote? All right, cast your votes. It passed unanimously. Then item 8N is a public hearing regarding the police aspect of the public safety sales tax. Is there anyone here hoping to speak on item 8N today? All right. Cast your votes. It passed unanimously. Item 8O is the issue that Fred Hall came in and explained to us earlier. Did we vote then? Okay, so we're on to item 8P. This is a revocable permit to hold the Klassen 10 Pen Community Festival on June 28th in McKinley Park. Is there anyone here representing the Klassen 10 Pen Neighborhood Association today? Hey, you want to come up forward and tell us about your event? Good morning. We will need your name and address for the record.
Jeff Struble, 1916 Northwest 18th Street. Wasn't prepared to talk really today, but yeah, we're having our second annual festival. We have starting about in the afternoon till 10 o'clock on that Saturday. We're going to be having bands and food trucks and a lot of booths selling artists. So it's a nice little festival for Klassen 10 neighborhood. Trying to just kind of build more of a sense of community there in the great park that we have there in Klassen 10 Pen.
I'm glad to see you doing this. I've always thought McKinley Park was underused.
Yes, definitely.
And it's you know, for the resources that are there and what's available.
Yes,
I'd love to see the neighborhood get more involved in activities there. So we appreciate this.
Yeah, it's been nice with the Strong Neighborhood Initiative. We've got new sidewalks and lighting going down McKinley to the park. So it's, you know, kind of highlight in the park also.
Maybe this can be the catalyst for more involvement. So
Yes,
thank you for
definitely.
doing this. Any, how about a motion then on item 8P1? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
So again, that is going to be June 28th, which I guess is what, a couple of weeks from Saturday. Item 8P2 is a request to hold the Juneteenth Festival in Washington Park. Is there anyone here representing this organization? Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Connie Neal. I'm with Perry Publishing and Broadcasting, 1457 Northeast 23rd Street. This will be our 5th year hosting the Juneteenth Festival. It'll be our 3rd year at Washington Park, and we're just trying to make it happen again. Good food, music, and fun.
How many people attended last year?
Last year we did probably about 1,500 or so. Wow. And the crowd kept changing over throughout the day. So,
So more people than that, probably.
They come, they go, they come, they go. Then it rained a little bit, and a lot of people stayed underneath the tent, didn't go anywhere, so it was pretty awesome.
That's great. Well, good luck. And again, that's June 14th, so coming up.
Now, this event is free to the public, correct?
Correct, free.
And you all have bands playing throughout with the headliner of?
Angela Winbush, as well as a national recording artist, Jarvis, and we'll have over 20 local acts and bands performing.
I've been going ever since they, Perry Broadcasting Communication, has held this event, and every year it has been outstanding, getting better and better. And so I will be there on Saturday.
Hey, thank you. I will too.
All right. John, you want to make a motion?
I move for approval.
Cast your votes on item 8P2. It passed unanimously. Good luck. Item 8Q, I understand we do not need executive session on this item.
Do not.
How about a motion then to move it on? Cast your votes. It passed unanimously. And same story on item 8R. We do not need executive session here.
Right.
Motion? Cast your votes. It passed unanimously. Item 8S, I understand this meets the criteria, so we do not need executive session here as well. How about a motion? Cast your votes. It passed unanimously. Item 8T, no update necessary, so this is a motion to strike, probably applicable. Cast your votes. That item is struck from the agenda. Item 8U is claims recommended for denial. Is there anyone here hoping to speak under any item listed under 8U? All right, how about a motion then? Cast your votes. Those claims are denied. On to item 9. These are claims recommended for approval. Is there anyone here hoping to speak under any item listed under item 9? All right, how about a motion to pay the claims? Cast your votes. These claims will be paid. We're on to item 10. These are items from council. We'll go ahead and vote for item 810A and B. The first is for city business related to travel expenses for 2 council members to attend the Integrated Emergency Management course at the National Emergency Training Center's Emergency Management Institute, which is in Maryland, up in August. Is there a motion here on item 10A? Cast your votes. It passed unanimously. Then item 10B.
I want to thank the council for going to this event. I know this is may not be the highlight of your summertime activities, but it really is important to it is important. You know, it's something, well, it is important.
All right. And item 10B is for National League of Cities, and we have council people who represent us on national committees. This would pay their travel expenses. Is there a motion on item 10B? Cast your votes. It passed unanimously. Item 11, we're still on items from council. Pat, you got anything for us today? All right, John, David?
Yes, I'd like to congratulate. I'd like to congratulate the City County Health Department on the opening of their new South temporary facility located at the former Hillcrest Hospital. They'll be providing immunization, clinic, and they'll be eventually working with OU physicians, primary care, North Care mental health services, and community health services. They'll be open during the week, Monday through Friday. Their plans are, this is a temporary location, is to build a similar facility like the one that they have north of Remington Park, which is a very nice facility, and they are really reaching out to try to help improve the overall health, especially in an area that's really challenged in the southwest part of the city. So congratulations to them. And speaking of health, Your Honor and Jim, I was going to see, you know, a few weeks ago we had IMSA give members of the council a quick demonstration on applying CPR. If we could somehow, whether we do that in a presentation here before council, because it's a fairly quick presentation, or somehow get that on our website as we go into the summer months, I just think sharing that information with as many people as possible would be very important. So I'm just making that as a suggestion.
Okay, good one. Pete?
I just want to remind everyone that we're dedicating, unless it's raining outside, I think, we're dedicating Kitchen Park this afternoon at 1 o'clock at Southeast 119th and Sunny and Sooner. And it's really this is a good week for the kind of signature projects that come out of the bond election we had in 2007. This is the result of that bond election, as is the fire station that'll be dedicated later this week. So it's really a good week to show the public what the funds are, what they're being used for. I'm especially pleased with the park at Kitchen Lake. It's a really has been the result of a lot of cooperation between the Water Trust that owned the land where Kitchen Lake was located, is purchased as part of the West Elm Creek expansion area years and years ago, and the Parks Department, and then the bond funds to make it all work. It's just, and it's really a beautiful little place. Most people, like myself, that grew up in that part of Oklahoma City, you know, have known it was there for a long, long time. But it's a spring-fed lake that is just absolutely beautiful, and it's going to be really a nice addition to Southeast Oklahoma City. So anyway, all of you can come. The mayor's going to be there, and I'm going to be there to make sure he says all the right things.
Pete, can I clarify something? Is it 1 o'clock or 1:30?
I had it at 1 o'clock, but perhaps it's 1:30.
I believe it's 1:30.
I think it's 1:30. At least that's what I had down.
Okay.
But
Well, you
it'll
can
be a
come.
very nice event. I plan on going there.
As wet as it is, you might want to come at 1 so you get paved parking. It's really beautiful. I was there yesterday and the day before, just kind of looking at it all to see, and it really is going to be something wonderful for Southeast.
Larry?
Thank you, Your Honor. A couple of neighborhoods had great picnics over the weekend. Windsor Forest at Harrow Park and Briarwood at a neighbor's house in Briarwood. It was great community involvement, a lot of enthusiasm. And then the Friends of 10th Street just sent 2 representatives out to the SEPTED training in Nevada. That's a process whereby architecturally you can impact crime at multifamily housing units. They're very excited about the positive outcome that will come from that. And also they're very excited to continued efforts of Sergeant Scowl and Major Becker on the crime initiative in that area that James and I serve. Thank you, Your Honor.
Ed? James? All right. City manager reports.
We've already heard from sister cities, but we do have updates this morning on a couple of council priorities. The first is maintaining strong financial management, and Craig Freeman is here.
Thank you. We'll take a look at the council priorities. On a quarterly basis, we come back to the council and review the different council priorities. Today, we're looking at maintaining strong financial management, and then Aubrey Hammondtree and Bob Teener will be looking at promoting thriving neighborhoods. So as we look at maintaining strong financial management, the measures that were identified to help us track this was our bond rating, our general obligation bond rating, the percent of general fund reserves, and then citizen satisfaction with city services. So these 3 measures were selected as high-level measures, as indicators of our progress in addressing the council priority of promoting maintaining strong financial management. The AAA bond rating provides us, it's first a reflection of strong financial management for the city that we achieve the AAA bond rating. It starts with the leadership of the council in the way that we manage our funds, but it provides benefits to the city and to our citizens in allowing for lower borrowing costs and allowing us then to put more money into capital projects. But it also allows us to be able to use that AAA bond rating to help other entities, other trusts, to strengthen their bond ratings if they need assistance or support with their bonds. And so a couple of those that we've had recently was we provided support for COTPA on the construction of the Arts District garage. And then we also provided support, the City Council provided the support backing for the Project 180 improvements in the downtown streets. And so those were two areas where we benefited with other entities, the Economic Development Trust and COTPA, to allow them to access lower borrowing costs and help them with putting more money into their projects as well. The next two slides cover quotes that we had from Standard & Poor's and Moody's from this past year as they both confirmed our AAA bond rating. These quotes talk a lot about, and the statements that they made in their reports about the financial leadership and the elected officials and your leadership in making strong financial management decisions for the city. And when we look at the other statements that were made within the reports from Moody's and Standard & Poor's as they evaluated our general obligation bond sale for this last year, they noted that the fact that the city as the state's economic engine was one factor that helped to solidify the strength of our bonds. Also that we have strong financial reserves, and that's one of the other measures that we'll look at here in a few minutes. A history of voter approval and voter support for both for both infrastructure and quality of life projects, and then annual funding of our pension contributions. And so we'll talk about that in a minute and look at the pension funding position for our employee retirement system. One of the measures that we also monitor.
Stop there for a second. When we had our last bond rating, folks came in. We're AAA. It was interesting to listen to the discussion in the room amongst the bond raters. They were trying to decide or debating amongst themselves who was a stronger credit, Austin or Oklahoma City, and we're both AAA. And so it wasn't that we're just a AAA, it was really who was the strongest of the AAAs out there. And they didn't come up with a consensus, but they pointed out the pros and cons. But to be held in that discussion of not just being a AAA, but amongst their best AAAs, that was gratifying.
And that's important to note too, that there's only 12 other communities in the nation that have a population over 500,000 that have a AAA bond rating. So it's a very strong rating, a very strong indication of the financial strength of the city and the direction the city's moving in. We also look at, and the rating agencies evaluate our ability to be able to repay the bonds, and since we use property taxes to repay those bonds, we use a ratio of bonded debt or general obligation debt to our net assessed value. And you can see this remains fairly constant at about 11.5%. And as we move forward and continue to work to keep our mill levy, the rate that we have on property tax for city projects at about 16 mills, that should continue to stay fairly constant and is a strong measure for us. We talked about the pension liability, and you all have been involved in discussions with the pension liability. If you look in 2007, you can see that we were at 108% funded on our employee retirement system. This system provides the pensions for management and general pay plan employees. It represents a little bit over half of the employees of the city. We were at 108% funded in 2007 prior to the recession and the downturn in the stock market. You can see then we fell through 2011 down to about 87%. At that time, the board came back, the retirement board came back, reevaluated the system, came forward with recommendations to the council that we put a lower cap on the potential cost of living increases to help strengthen the system, and that moved the system back to about 99% funded. So it's a very strong pension system. You look across the nation at state and municipal pension systems, and our funded ratio is very strong by comparison. And it's something that I mentioned it before, that the rating agencies not only look at your current position where you are, but they also look at, the City Council has passed an ordinance that commits to funding the annual required contribution rate, and having that built into an ordinance further strengthens our position with the bond rating agencies because they know that we're committed to either maintaining or getting back to 100% funding if we fall below that because of losses within the stock market or other factors. We talked earlier about the general fund budget, the amount of percent of unbudgeted reserves maintained in the general fund. You can see that the band, the shaded band, shows the policy that was adopted by the council. Prior to 2011, that policy set a range, a targeted range for reserves of between 6 and 10%. The solid line shows how we've actually began each year, what our beginning fund balance or unbudgeted reserve level was as a percentage of the general fund budget. You can see that each year, but you can see in 2011 that moved from 8%, from 6 to 10% to 8 to 15%. That represents, that targeted range represents about 1 to 2 months worth of operating revenue for the general fund. In those years where we begin the year with an unbudgeted reserve that's above the targeted range, then we'll usually come back to the council with recommendations, or the council will come forward then with decisions about how to use those funds. One of the policies that we do have in our financial policies is that any reserves or fund balances used, that we want to use that for one time. If we budget it, we want to use that for one-time type expenditures, and most often that's been used for street improvements like it was in this past year. And right now our projection you see in 2015 is that we'll be right at the top of that range as we finish the year. We'll be right at the top of that 8 to 15% range, which is a very strong position. The last measure that we'll look at is one that is a little bit outside of financial management and some of the other financial measures, but it's one that was chosen because if all we do is focus on these strong financial measures, but we don't look at how we're serving our citizens, we can miss the boat on our full responsibilities to serve our citizens. And so the services that we provide to them are measured in the citizen survey in individual portions, that we look at individual different services. This particular measure looks at overall city services, kind of a combination. It says, ask the citizens, how would you rate our services? And you can see it's ranged between 63 and 70% since 2007. In the last survey in 2013, it was at 68%. When you make that as a comparison to the national average, and this is a national average for other large cities, you can see in 2013 that was a 49%. So it's well above the national average, which is a strong rating. So when we look at those combined measures of how we're doing financially as well as how we're serving our citizens, it provides some balance to that goal and that purpose of maintaining strong financial management for the city. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Of the 12 cities with AAA bond ratings, how many are in our region other than Austin?
I know that, let me see here, I've got that I think on my notes. Austin, San Antonio, and Albuquerque are the three that within our region. Mm-hmm. And with that, I'll turn it over to Aubrey.
Good morning. I'd like to talk about the council priority for promoting thriving neighborhoods. Bob Tiener and I both are going to share reporting what our departments do toward this priority for council, even though we know that these two departments are not the only ones that contribute to this. Starting out with planning is really, this is at the core of what the planning department does. Our foundation is building better communities, and at the heart of our communities are our neighborhoods. So our department has many programs and initiatives and plans focused on this specific priority, from the comprehensive plan, which is the city's overall framework guiding policy document about the city's growth, down to individual programs and several federally funded programs. I'll talk about a few in a second. The three indicators that were chosen toward this priority in reporting our progress are looking at the number of vacant and abandoned properties within the city. In 2012, we did a study that was presented at council that identified the magnitude of the problem, putting it at about 12,000 structures that were vacant or abandoned. It's vacant 6 months or longer. The increase in the dwelling units within the inner loop, so looking at kind of the core of our city, our traditional neighborhoods, and understanding how growth to the perimeter of our city and outlying areas is impacting the stability of the neighborhoods that are our oldest neighborhoods. And the percent of residents who say that their neighborhoods are a great place to live. We do have room to grow. Our last citizen survey was reporting 71% of our citizens felt their neighborhood was a great place to live, which is a thing to be proud of, but we definitely have room to improve. So on the first indicator of the vacant and abandoned properties, knowing that 12,000 of them are out there, the vast majority of those are residential properties. And the study helped us quantify the problem and measure the impact. And we do know that these vacant and abandoned properties increase crime rates in our neighborhoods. They damage the appearance of our neighborhoods. They affect surrounding property values. They decrease investment interest in those areas. The overall vitality of neighborhoods and their surrounding commercial is impacted. And we know that they require additional city services such as police, fire, code enforcement, and animal welfare. And looking at where these properties are located, it's not surprising that there's a concentration of vacant and abandoned properties in the older areas that we're trying to focus reinvestment and revitalization within. But they are spread throughout the city, and it is the city's problem, not just the inner city's problem. And we know that those residential vacancy rates are increasing. It is a national trend, not just something that's happening in Oklahoma City. But we know that we really do need to address this problem to help promote thriving neighborhoods. Our citizenry also supports action toward this goal. Through our comprehensive plan process we've been conducting over the last several years, we've done a series of surveys and studies. And we have gotten the highest support rating of any of the questions that we've asked on this question. We did a Plan OKC, which is the new comprehensive plan, citizen survey about whether or not residents would support the city charging some sort of fee to the owners of these vacant and abandoned properties to help offset those costs that the city accrues, and an overwhelming 83% supported that concept. We also had done several workshops through our comprehensive plan process where 92% of the participants felt that the city should invest in programs to reduce the number of vacant and abandoned buildings. So clearly we have support that we discussed this morning from our elected officials in the council as well as our citizens. Last March, our city was selected from other cities to attend an institute at Harvard Law School to focus on this issue. And we had, we were really fortunate in that we were able to share ideas and identify resources other cities have invested in this issue as well, with some cities who probably have a lot worse off situation than Oklahoma City. A delegation of 7 different representatives was formed to represent different facets of the community that all have an impact on being able to sway vacant and abandoned properties issues. It included the county assessor, representatives from different city departments, representatives from city council, and different representatives from commercial and residential real estate. And they did discuss different tools that cities use. And it was an interesting discussion because beyond the steps that Oklahoma City was in the middle of taking, they were talking about what happens after that, what happens beyond that, what are different strategies that are longer-term strategies. So after the Institute, the group, the delegation that went, came back and said, we would really like to continue these discussions to try to figure out what works best for Oklahoma City, and recommended that we keep those discussions going through the formation of a consortium. So focusing on the second indicator and increasing the number of dwelling units within the inner loop, we do know that about 1/3 of our growth this last year has occurred in the inner loop. We want our goal to be about 1/2 of that growth. 0.5% goes, over the past 8 years has been our trend in locating within the inner loop. So we do see that that number is increasing, but we have several challenges. One being that the concentration of poverty is greater inside the inner city or within the inner loop. And not surprisingly, household incomes are also lower in this area, which expresses that need for more affordable housing for people with lower incomes inside the city's core. And part of our process in looking at that is knowing what type of housing is available within the market and what kind of housing is demanded. Looking at the past, since 1990, these are the types of housing that have been built in that time frame, and you can see the primary housing type has been the standard lot single-family residential. Very few small lot single-family residential units were built in that time frame, and those are typically the ones that are more affordable, with other types of products that could be affordable, like townhomes, were hardly built at all. And when we did our study asking for the market demand of what type of housing people would like to live in the next 5 years, we can see that that doesn't really correlate with what's been built. There's less of a demand as thought for that standard single-family and a much greater demand for the small lot single-family market and townhomes and condos. So we know that those types of housing could be built in Oklahoma City and would be very successful here.
Aubrey, excuse me, is it okay to ask a question at this point? Could we go back to that slide? Any suggestions, or are you considering recommendations or suggestions as to how to encourage builders to meet this type of demand? I mean, if you wanted to go to the extremes, you could say some of the outlying areas, we would no longer allow any new developments to take place.
I think there are probably a combination of strategies that we'll be proposing in the new comprehensive plan. We're going to be trying to make it easier for people to do development on smaller lots and perhaps being able to incentivize different types of development. We've talked to developers for many years about what are the barriers to doing this, and I really think that part of it is market demand or perceived demand for different types of housing units. One of the things that I think might help is for people to see the demand expressed in these surveys, and maybe there could just be a general interest in developing different types.
So perhaps an education program is what's helpful initially?
We're hoping that this information will spark a lot of new interest in different housing types, and we're already seeing that take place. But we do hope that the comprehensive plan can guide where smaller lot single-family or townhome or condos would be appropriate and would be easier to develop.
The reason I bring that up, even in Ward 5 on the outlying communities, the smaller lot concept is being proposed. And so why we don't see it in the inner city is it's hard to understand.
Mm-hmm. It's more difficult, I think, to develop in areas where you have infill situations, where you don't have large tracts of land that you can develop from scratch. So those are some of our challenges, too, in trying to promote thriving neighborhoods in the part that's already been developed.
Thank you.
How scientific are these surveys? Because in addition to the 83% number, like how random is the sample and all that?
This survey was a statistically significant survey done by Plan OKC consultants, and they did a sampling across the city and made sure that they looked at it to get correct demographic response according to our demographic profile of our city. Okay. And it had a very high confidence rating of this. The combination of those other, the 83% and the 92% ratings were a combination of surveys and workshop participants, so it was a conglomeration of data. It's not a statistically significant sample.
So are these aren't the surveys that get sent out in email?
Many of them were sent out in, they were, this survey specifically was primarily done by phone, but you were available to take it online as well.
Okay.
And as I mentioned, we have been seeing this interest in developing in the inner city and in the downtown area specifically increasing over the past several years, as you can notice by this trend line. And we know that downtown housing has been developing, and currently we have 2,000 units spread across the different districts in downtown. But we know that what's planned is going to double that number of units within the coming years. Beyond downtown, we know that we have the ability to affect single-family product inside the inner city or the inner loop, and the planning department has specific programs that can assist in this. The down payment assistance program last year was able to provide 69 families with assistance in buying new homes. We also have federal programs such as HOME, that have been able to construct new homes in specific neighborhoods, and they increase the property values of those neighborhoods. We also know that we need help rehabilitating existing homes, not just building new ones. And one of our federally funded programs has been able to rehabilitate approximately 65 homes. And it's great to see the investment in the surrounding property values happen when these existing homes can be improved and new homes in those same neighborhoods can be constructed. And last but not least, we know that all of these efforts don't really mean anything unless our neighborhoods and our residents feel like their property values are protected, their safety is protected, their appearance is good, and they feel ownership and a sense of place. So through our citizen survey, we ask residents that. One thing that we know does impact the quality of neighborhoods is what happens surrounding them. a national study was done to analyze the impact of those surrounding commercial districts to neighborhoods. It looked at 27 different cities over a span of 14 years and identified that home values increased by 50% when they're located next to these commercial districts. Therefore, we have a program, the Commercial District Revitalization Program, that focuses on strengthening those districts that support neighborhoods. Citizens also support this. In our Plan OKC survey, 73% of residents agreed that it's important for the city to support the redevelopment of those cultural and commercial areas where they live. This year, we are measuring our success of the Commercial District Revitalization Program by looking at sales tax performance. It's a new measure, so we don't have data on every single one of those districts, but as a baseline, we measured the Plaza District. It's had some really significant impacts and investment and success over the last year. If you compare the baseline sales tax revenue increase from the city to the Plaza districts, you can see that that district has been very successful. And we know that typically these types of districts have more locally owned businesses, therefore we know that those sales tax dollars are staying local to our community. Right now, we are currently working with 13 districts across the city. Most of these are concentrated in that area that we're trying to improve the health of our neighborhoods. We really started in earnest in 2009 working with these districts, and every year we have a greater and growing demand for these services. The next program I wanted to talk about is the Strong Neighborhoods Initiative. This is a program that has really been able to focus resources on 3 specific areas in Oklahoma City to make a really strong impact on those. It's a federally funded program. From 2013 to 15, we have $4 million that we're able to invest in this program in the Classen Tenpen neighborhood, which you heard from today. It's doing a festival, Classen's North Highland Park, and Culbertson's East Highland. In these neighborhoods, they all have vacancy rates. They all have an issue with owner-occupied properties, and they all have vacant lots. In fact, every single street in all 3 of these neighborhoods has at least one vacant or abandoned property. So we know that through the program, we can help tip that decline in those neighborhoods. We're trying to rebuild the physical fabric of those neighborhoods, trying to empower residents to be able to organize and provide leadership so that they can sustain success in their neighborhood beyond what we can impact now, to improve the economy and educational opportunities, and to make sure that they feel they have healthy and safe environments to live in, overall improving that satisfaction in their neighborhood. Some of our strategies with the funding in the next fiscal year are going to be providing those physical improvements. You heard Jeff Struble talk today about the neighborhood that they live in, having new sidewalks constructed. We're doing housing rehabilitation and homeowner assistance, enrichment programs with public art and after-school programs, and different types of cleanup efforts, removing hazardous trees, and providing enhancements to parks. And last but not least, Planning Department really strives to emphasize promoting thriving neighborhoods through its overall comprehensive plan. Right now, we're in the final stages doing the final draft of the plan, and we wanted to point out several points that this plan will emphasize. It's to create that diversity, the stable mixed-income neighborhoods, to revitalize and strengthen our existing neighborhoods and preserve those resources and make sure that we have high-quality new development in the future. And we're seeing these themes emerge out of all of the studies and the public input that we've received to date on the plan, that we need to revitalize, redevelop, and reinvest. We keep seeing a reoccurring theme that we need to fix what we have over building new, that we need to maintain a focus on our public safety, and improve health and well-being. But I want you to pay attention to some of these that are coming straight out of this process, saying to enhance the quality of our schools and education system by improving our neighborhoods, goes hand in hand, and to achieve those thriving and attractive neighborhoods through placemaking. So our plan will be emphasizing that, and I think through our comprehensive plan and all the other programs, we're really trying to make efforts towards this council priority. With that, I'll let Bob Tiener talk about his department, then we'd be happy to answer your questions.
Good morning. I just have a few slides here. If I can, okay. Development Services is basically charged with enforcing the codes, but I want to talk about some things where we get involved with the community. We have 110 pet placement partners. These are people that when we get animals in, we're able to take them out of the shelter, and they care for them, they foster them, and then they put them in other adoption programs that helps us keep those animals out of the shelter. Our community spay and neuter program I talked about at my budget presentation, it allows us to do over 3,000 spayed and neuters for the community. We have a waiting list on that in that program, so it's been very successful. Our volunteer program is really important to us. We have people that come out to the shelter, they walk dogs, they do laundry, they do all kinds of things for us. It takes some of the load off of our staff and provides the animals that we do have in the shelter a little better quality of life while they're in there. The River Park neighborhood deal, that's just an example that we try to reach out to neighborhood associations. If they have meetings, we'll send a representative there, and they'll explain the problems we have with animals in the community. And we're going to try to do more of that in the future. Our code
Bob,
enforcement.
can I interrupt you on the animal welfare? You said we have a waiting list on spay neuter. How long is that list?
I don't have that number, but I know that we set them up. We have to set them up. We have to do appointments, and so it seems like we have appointments through 2 months. That's as far out as we go. So whenever one comes open, we get somebody else to fill it. But
It
I
just
can,
seems like
I can
that's,
get that
that's an
number.
investment that, that might save us money in the long run to keep the spay and neutering program fully funded. So yeah, I'd love to see numbers on, what it would take to keep that fully funded where we're not having to wait 2 months.
Okay, we'll look at that.
Okay.
Councilperson Salyer asked at my budget hearing if our intake had actually decreased. And I looked at the numbers, and it's actually gone down in the last 2 years to about 25,000 a year, where we were close to 30,000 for the 3 years prior. So that's an indication that the more animals in the community that are spayed and neutered, the fewer animals we see in the shelter.
Okay.
And that's in spite of the city's growth in population. Code enforcement, we attend more than one a month. Charles Locke, he goes there and it gives the neighbors an opportunity to talk about existing complaints, and it also kind of lets them know what the process is to turn in a complaint to the Action Center. Town hall meetings, that's really something we support council. We do 3 or 4 a year. It's either, to inform about code enforcement, or it could be if there's a zoning case that, there's some concern with, we can send our zoning subdivision staff and they can explain the case to them. I know Councilman Pest, we've had a couple this year. Then the code enforcement sign training, that's been going on since about 2007. We train neighborhoods to pick up the trash signs around the perimeter of their neighborhood. I think this year we had 17 neighborhoods sign up, which is really up. And we pick up, I think it was 38,000 illegal signs a year. And we have 4 part-time inspectors that do that, and counting what the neighborhoods do. I mean, that just gets that trash off the street, makes their neighborhood, the entrance to their neighborhoods look better. And then Development Center, the Building Safety Month, that was May. We partnered with Lowe's, and basically our Development Center manager, our superintendent, our chiefs all attended about 4 hours on a Saturday morning, and we just provided information about when you need a permit, how you get a permit. We had a sign up. We had almost 100 people sign up so their children could get a backpack and sticker and a hard hat, and kind of inform them about how important it is to get permits. This is code enforcement abatement. This is what I really want to show you here. This is voluntary compliance. What we've learned is when our inspectors in the field have a positive contact with somebody that has a complaint, they're more likely to resolve that violation voluntarily without us having to go through the citation or a contractor program. We average about, our goal is 75% compliance, and we're right at 74% right now. So what we try to do there is we provide our inspectors with customer training so they understand how to deal with the customer when they're in that situation. This is our live exit rate. We've talked about that. This just kind of showing you how important it is to work with our community partners, ASPCA, the Humane Society. This next one, I kind of threw this one in here. Due to the storms last year, we've had a really, I think it's an over a 2,000% increase in storm shelters in our neighborhoods. And I think we're almost at 9,000. That's through May of this year. One thing that we did do, when you get a shelter, you want to register. In the past, you've had to do that independent of the permit process. We've added a provision in our permit where if you check a box, and we'll do that for you. And so that saves the property owners a step. And really, what kind of surprises me, the property owners get these permits more than the shelter companies. They make the property owner come down, and really you're getting these in one day most of the time. Sometimes it takes 2 days, but if you come in the morning, you'll get it the same day. And then this is my last slide, and I think this has probably been discussed. You know, we're looking at our options here for vacant abandoned buildings, and we'll come back with you with recommendations. So I'm available for questions.
You got a full plate, don't you, Bob?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Ed?
Can I just ask a question about the timeline? You said that you're putting together a comprehensive plan, I guess rough draft, and then where do we go from there?
Hopefully we adopt it. But the timeframe is we hope to have our draft plan done this summer and start reviewing that with community feedback. We are convening some focus groups to really kind of fine-tune some of the policies before they're developed in the draft holistically. We will convene our citizen advisory team one more time to talk about the input we received in focus groups. And hopefully we'll be scheduling a joint City Council Planning Commission workshop this fall. So we have quite a few things yet to do and talk about, but we're hoping to get the plan adopted this year, by the end of the year.
Any other questions? All right, Aubrey, Bob, thank you.
That's it.
Okay. If citizens to be heard, Joe Nelson.
Joe Nelson, y'all just blew my whole day, and all of it was good. This is the first time I've seen the council really get down to the people's business. This was interesting today for a change. I compliment you all from both sides of the table. The lady that just left here, I mean, I enjoyed her program. That was all the people's business. Can't ask for much better than that. And, well, I really wanted to really get into it, but I really don't want to. But, boy, you look really serious over there. I wasn't going to do anything bad. But anyway, Miss Kersey, how are you today? I'm going to shut it off. I know times everybody's probably hungry and whatever have you. I know Mr. Jordan's smiling. He says, boy, I'm glad he's doing that. I read your mind. Mayor, the rest of you, I wished you'd smile just once at me. Is it really that bad? Y'all have a nice day.
All right, thanks, Joe. All right, that'll do it. We're adjourned.